Okay, so let's dive in. Have you ever noticed this on your motorcycle? You're riding along, you look at your speedo, it says one thing.
Yeah.
Then you check your phone's GTS or a dedicated unit, and it's showing you're actually going maybe a bit slower.
It's something a lot of riders pick up on, definitely.
Exactly. So it leads to this pretty critical question, right? If the speedometer is reading high, over-reporting your speed,
Hmm.
does that mean the odometer, the thing tracking total distance, is also quietly racking up extra miles?
That's the core of it. Are you accumulating ghost miles?
Right. So today, let's really unpack this. We're going to look at how these instruments actually work, why they're so connected, and what causes these little accuracy quirks.
Sounds good. And what's really fascinating here, right from the start, is that both speed and distance,
Yeah.
they come from the same basic thing.
Okay.
It's all about the rotation, how fast your wheels, or sometimes the transmission output shaft, are spinning.
Whether it's an old bike with a cable or a new one.
Exactly. Older systems used, physical cables, spinning magnets, complex gears. Modern bikes, mostly electronic, they use wheel speed sensors that generate electrical pulses.
Simpler, maybe.
In concept, perhaps. But the key thing, the critical link, as you called it, is how the data is used now.
Go on.
Well, usually there's a single speed sensor. It sends raw rotation data straight to the bike's brain, the engine control unit, or ECU.
Got it. The ECU.
And here's the important part. The ECU takes that one stream of data, and it calculates both your current speed for the speedometer and the distance traveled for the odometer.
Ah, so they're not just related. They're basically running off the exact same calculation processed from the same input.
Precisely. They're intrinsically linked. Same source, same initial processing.
Okay, so if that's the case, why do we see that difference between the speedo and the GPS? And how does that directly, mess with the odometer reading?
Well, there are a couple of main reasons. The big one is often a deliberate choice by the manufacturer.
Deliberate? How so?
They often build in a safety margin. They calibrate the speedometer to read a little high, maybe 5%, sometimes even up to 10% faster than your actual ground speed.
Why would they do that? Liability. Encouraging safer speeds.
Probably a bit of both. It sort of nudges you to ride slightly slower than you think you are. But, and here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Because the system's base calculation is intentionally set high to make the speedo read fast. And the odometer uses that same inflated logic. It means your odometer will rack up miles proportionally faster, too.
Wow, okay. So that safety margin directly adds miles you haven't actually ridden.
That's right. Then there's the tires. Tire size and pressure are huge factors.
How does that work?
If you use tires that aren't the size the manufacturer recommends, or even if your tire pressure is off too low or too high,
Right.
it changes the tire's effective rolling circumference.
Yeah.
Basically, how far it travels in one full rotation.
Ah.
So if the system is expecting, say, a certain distance per rotation, but your underinflated tire is actually smaller around and has to spin more times to cover the same ground.
It thinks you're going faster and covering more distance.
Exactly. It misinterprets the number of revolutions. So speed reads high, and the odometer clocks up miles faster.
So it's really not just about that number you see on the speedo for a second. It's this cumulative effect.
Definitely.
If the whole system, for whatever reason, safety margin, wrong tires, maybe even a dodgy sensor.
Yeah, sensor or system faults can happen too. Dirt, damage, wear and tear in older systems.
Right. If any of that causes the system to overestimate rotations or distance per rotation, both speed and total distance go up.
That's the direct causal link. A speedometer reading 10% high means an odometer accumulating miles roughly 10% faster.
Okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture then. What are the real-world consequences for you, the rider, if your odometer is piling on these extra miles?
Well, they can be quite significant, actually. First off, think about maintenance.
Your service intervals.
Exactly. You might hit your scheduled maintenance points much sooner based on the odometer reading than based on actual usage.
Right.
This could mean, unnecessary service costs, changing parts before they're truly worn out.
That could add up. What else?
Resale value. It's a big one. Higher mileage almost universally means a lower price when you go to sell your bike.
Because buyers assume more wear and tear.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even if some of those miles aren't real miles ridden. And then there's warranty.
Ah, the mileage limits on warranties.
Yep. You could potentially find yourself exceeding your warranty's mileage cap prematurely, which could be a nasty surprise if something goes wrong.
Okay, so this isn't just a minor annoyance. It can have real financial impact. So what can you actually do about it? How do you check, and can you fix it?
Verification is pretty straightforward, actually. The best way is using a GPS.
Like a phone app.
A smartphone app works, or a dedicated GPS unit. Ride at a steady speed, compare the GPS speed to your speedo. You can also track distance on a known route using the GPS trip meter versus your bike's trip meter. That gives you a solid comparison.
And if you find a discrepancy, what about fixing it?
For correction, especially on modern bikes with electronic systems, there are solutions. You can install aftermarket electronic devices, often called speedometer calibrators. You might hear brand names like Speedo Healer.
What do they do?
They basically sit between the speed sensor and the ECU. You program them to adjust the signal frequency up or down, effectively telling the ECU the correct speed.
And since the odometer uses the same signal,
It corrects both simultaneously, get the speedo right, and the odometer follows.
are there other ways?
In some cases, a specialist technician might be able to adjust parameters directly in the ECU software, though that's less common for users to do themselves. And never underestimate the basics.
Meaning?
Always,
Yeah.
always use the manufacturer's recommended tire sizes and keep them inflated to the correct pressure. That's fundamental. Get that wrong, and even a calibrator is just compensating for an underlying issue.
Right, start with the simple stuff. Tires first. Okay, so wrapping this up, the answer to that initial question seems pretty clear. Yes, if your speedometer is reading fast,
Yeah, your odometer is definitely accumulating mileage faster, too.
it all comes down to them sharing that same rotational data and the same calculation logic, whether it's intentionally offset or thrown off by tires or sensors. And understanding this, maybe checking your own bike, it's pretty important for keeping accurate maintenance logs, protecting your resale value, and just, really knowing what your bike is doing.
Absolutely. And, this raises an important final thought for you to consider. What might you actually gain or perhaps save by making sure the story your motorcycle's instruments are telling?